Hello, Midnight TCG members. This is Midnight Fox, and we're coming to you with this week's Competitive Edge podcast. Since last week's was so popular, we're going to kind of go along the same lines. Tonight, we have Genzaki recording. We have Eddie with us tonight. And we have Genzo.
How do?
And last week, we kind of talked about some viable deck options on a budget. This week, kind of go to look at the side deck, some side deck options that may be more budget appropriate for meta cards to look at as an option. So anyways, we kind of went through most of that last week, so we'll kind of get in just straight into it this week. For me, my first pick this week is a card that for quite some time was hard to come by, but it's gotten quite a bit easier to come by, and that's Prime Material Dragon. 6-star light monster, 2400 attack, 2000 defense. Number one, the reason I say he's a good side deck option is some burn decks are starting to make a comeback. So, as an option against like Chain Burn, possibly, you could look at having that in your side deck. But the main reason I look at it is for his ability to negate destruction, to save your spell and trap zone, to save your monsters at the cost of a discard. So, unlike Stardust, where you send it to the graveyard and he comes back, and unlike Zenmaines, who you drop Xyz units, and Maystroke, where you drop Xyz units, Prime Material does have a cost, but he still offers you the ability to negate destruction, and not just of one card, but multiple cards. That's one of the things that I look at him as a good reason why I picked it. Because we are in such a destruction-heavy meta with Zenmaines and Torrential at 2, Mirror Force at 2, Bottomless Trap Holes, because cards that Bottomless first says destroy, so cards like Prime Material Dragon can negate Bottomless because its first text is destroy and then remove. How does it offset the meta? To me, just what I just said, we are in a destruction-heavy meta. I mean, Dark Holes, Mirror Force, all the destruction that's available in the game, it's a good option. And even if it eventually hits the graveyard, it's still not dead because it's a light monster, which means it can be used for Chaos Food, and it can be supported by Honest, if you want to run Honest in the deck. How easy is it to come by? It was first released in, I believe, Phantom Darkness. Then it was re-released in a Gold series. And most recently, it was re-released in the Dragons Collide Structure deck. So it's had 3 releases of it. So the price of it's going to be a little bit cheaper than some of your options. Even Stardust usually runs for the lowest version, which is a rare, like $5 to $7, and if you want a holo, you're looking at anywhere between $8 and $12 for the most generic CT07 Super. So Prime Material Dragon is going to be a cheaper thing to look at because it has had 1 original print and 2 reprints. And I mean, abusing it, the big way to abuse it as a side deck option, like I said, some burn decks are starting to make a comeback. Decks that do damage by effect. So being able to have it there as a side deck option to stop burn damage is good. With Cylinder at 3, if you're playing against Eddie, it's great. And just to stop all the destruction that's available in the game. That's how I would abuse it, is to stop destruction. That's the main thing Prime Material was made for. But I mean, quite a few formats back in the Nurse Reticule area, it was your side deck option against that. But now with so much destruction available, I'd say you're going to use it more to stop destruction than you are to stop burn damage. Eddie, Ginzo, either of you got any thoughts on Prime Material?
I like the fact of course, the heal capability from him, but I know with Bottomless Shop Hole, he's going to be easily knocked out, so...
But he's saved.
Yeah.
He can use his effect on himself. The only disadvantage to Prime Material is the discard, so you're giving up some form of hand advantage to use that effect. But the other thing that's really good about Prime Material is he's not a once per turn monster either. But you got to have the hand to be able to discard for that destruction. So the downside to that, you have to maintain a hand, and if you want to keep your stuff safe, you're still going to have to empty your hand. So there is a downside to using him. Ginzo, thoughts?
I guess the last thought I'll throw at Prime Material Dragon would be, I guess, which deck would be more, or his presence would be more applicable in, would be either a Monarch variant, since they can put him on the field for virtually no cost with Treeborn and Rodent Totem, and then also, I guess, if you were going to use him as an option, you could use him in like the Chaos Dragons. I know they're not as relevant anymore, but if you are still a player who likes that deck, it's another option for you.
That's true. And, you know, other than being Chaos food, when he hits the graveyard in Chaos Dragons, he's food for the Chaos Dragons themselves, or I completely lost my train of thought. He's
Black Soldier and Chaos Pusher.
5-headed dragon. He's also food for 5-head.
Oh, like if you're running Dragon's Mirror.
Yeah, if you're going Chaos Dragons and you're running Dragon's Mirror, he's a good option to have in the graveyard in a Chaos Dragon build. And I mean, he's easily brought back with Red Eyes Darkness Metal, so yeah, another good point of Prime Material as an option. So if that's it, I'll pass it on to Eddie, and we'll get to his first card.
Okay. I decided to take, for my first card, Divine Wrath. So, since we're going to follow a format, why did I pick it? This card, if I recall correctly, was released first from...
I think it was Rise of Destiny, I think.
Yes. It was a super rare... I think it was a secret... Because I'm looking at the wiki right now, and it says...
It was a super and an ultimate.
Yeah.
It's super and an ultimate rare. After that, it went to Structure Deck 6 Spellcaster's Judgment. As a common. And then super rare common, rare / Starfoil from the Battle Pack Epic Dawn. But that's neither here nor there. Its effect is when a monster's effect is activated, you discard one card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that monster. So, things it can destroy. It can stop you Bell. The only thing it really can't do is hit things like Jinzo and Tyrant Dragon.
Continue effects.
Yeah, it can continue its effects. But you can stop Stardust Dragon. It can prevent Gores, Tragodia, and Battle Fader. It's one of the few cards that can negate the effect of Herald of Perfection and destroy it, since it is spell speed 3 and cannot be chained to by Herald's effect. A big card that it can stop in today's meta is Legendary 6 Samurai Shien.
Quite annoying, yes. I will
Yes.
give samurais. They still have a small presence in being able to annoy with shutting down the spell and trap zone.
Yeah. So, when you stop and look at Divine Wrath, you can get it for extremely cheap. I mean, I'd say you can get 3 for $1, depending on where you go. So, what was the other format here you wanted to follow?
How easy is it to come by? How would you abuse it?
Okay, how do I
set the meta?
Okay, how do I abuse it? I can stop a wind-up loop. I can, of course, shut down Shien. Oh, crud.
I think the big thing to look at with that is all the loops that Konami has created. Wind-ups, Mermails, Fire Fists.
Injectors.
Injectors, they're kind of dropping off big time. They're not as broken as when they first released. When they hit, I mean, yes, if they get the right cards in hand, they are. But I'm starting to agree with Genzo that you see them less and less now. But yeah, like wind-ups still have OTKs easily available to them. And I've said it for 2 formats now. Rat. Ugly little rodent. And Konami refuses to hit it.
But we digress.
But you're talking about that, but I mean, every engine that's fairly popular, rabbit variants are popular, wind-ups are popular.
I believe it can also stop the Mermails.
Mermails are highly popular, I believe. The last big event, YCS event I looked at, like 54% of players, I think, were playing Mermails. So you're highly loop dependent. Divine Wrath is going to be a good option against those.
And I believe you can also shut down, I just had the deck and it just left me.
Well, I guess what's important to say about Divine Wrath is it's a pretty straightforward card. And just realizing that it can negate any effect or monster's effect that activates. So outside of continuous effects, it gets everything. I mean, I guess I'll go ahead and talk on a point where Divine Wrath would be useless. I don't want to say useless, because if the player does things incorrectly, you could still use Divine Wrath, but where it's less than optimal is a good example is in the Mermail deck. You know, alone, any of those effects can be negated by Divine Wrath. You know, instead of trying to find a list, because, like I said, it negates every effect that activates, let's look at a situation where Divine Wrath would be a little weak, which is when they reveal Abyss Megalo to special summoning, they discard their 2 monsters, reveal Abyss Megalo. If you don't, well, let's see. They can stop you from negating their important effect. And the way they would do this is they would special summon the Megalo. He hits the field, now his effect activates, and they're gonna build their chain in a way that you can't negate an effect. And say their important effect that they want to keep, you know, pretty much free from negation would be Mermail or the Atlantean monster Marksman. So what they would do is say they discarded Atlantean Dragoons, Atlantean Marksman. Those are the 3 effects they're going to resolve. So when the chain resolves backwards, they're going to have Megalo on top, they're going to search their Abyss Sphere to their hand, and then Marksman is the one in the middle. And he's going to destroy a set card. Say you have a monster face down and you have your Divine Wrath. Well, your Divine Wrath wants to protect the monster from being destroyed, but it can't because Marksman is Chain Link 2, and any card that wants to negate an activation has to be able to chain directly to it. And since all three of those effects attempt to activate at the same time, the turn player gets to choose the order in which their chain resolves. And so they would put Dragoons as Chain Link 1, Marksman is Chain Link 2, and then Magalo on top. So Magalo resolves first, that would be an effect you can negate, and then Atlantean Dragoons, which is the last Chain Link to resolve, you'd be able to negate that, but not the Marksman in the middle.
And yeah, that's, I mean...
And I think I actually talked myself silly there, so...
I think the big thing is knowledge base of your players. Some newer players, some more inexperienced players, you may be able to use Divine Wrath against quite effectively, but your duelists, say at regionals, YCSs, who know the ins and outs, every up and down angle of the game, they're gonna play it out perfectly right to where your Divine Wrath, after the initial surprise probably in game 1, they're gonna blow your mind in game 2 and 3. But it's still a viable budget option to look at as a negator. Because we know Valor's skills, breakthrough skills, even their breakthrough skills are $20, Genzo. But breakthrough skills, Valor's, things like that, they're going to see things like that coming. But Divine Wrath has kind of dropped off the radar. So it is an option, but yet again, I want to digress back to kind of like Prime Material Dragon. The downside, the discard cost. So you're still giving up hand presence to activate the effect. So really, if I was thinking of running it in a budget build, I'd want something that was going to be useful to discard tour buses, dandelions, even a junk deck where you can throw out a Quillbolt Hedgehog or something. Something where if you're tossing something to the graveyard, you're going to get use out of it later. So I would think if I was running Divine Wrath as an option or Prime Material, I'd want something to where that discard is going to help me later. So both of those cards, I would really think to look at that when you're building your deck. If you decide on a budget you want to use either of those cards because of the discard cost. Kind of agree there, Genzo?
Yeah, you always want to minimize cost whenever you can.
So yeah, I mean, like Tour Bus, you can send back something to your opponents, from your opponent's graveyard to their deck, or your deck from your graveyard to your deck, or Dandelions, you can get your tokens, what have you. Yeah, try to minimize that discard cost for it. Because you know you can't use it for like Dark Worlds and stuff, but if you've got cards that can be useful in the graveyard or have an effect when they hit the graveyard from anywhere, like Tour Bus and Dandelion, definitely abuse that kind of engine if you're going to run Wrath or Prime Material. Any other thoughts on Divine Wrath? If not, we'll pass it on to Genzo with his first pick.
My first pick is pretty short and sweet. It's Lightning Vortex. I think everybody knows what the card does, but just to go ahead and say it anyway, you discard one card, destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls. Genzaki and I had a little discussion before the podcast talking about, excuse me, effects that won't allow you to destroy face-down monsters, and how relevant of a thought is that when you're thinking of a card you could use, because in most situations, what your opponent has is going to be face-up. And so that's why I chose Lightning Vortex, along with the fact that I think the game is becoming pretty much, if I don't lose this turn, I'll win the next turn. And so, if you can prevent yourself from losing the game with something like Swift Scarecrow, One Day of Peace, Threatening Roar, Dark Hole is just one card in your deck. So if you don't have the Dark Hole, or say you don't have the one or two Torrential Tributes, your outs become much more constricted, in what they can do for you, because you have to be lucky enough to either have it in hand already or draw it next. And so with Lightning Vortex as a side deck card, and even maybe something like Needle Sealing that does mass removal, I think it's a good choice, because if you run it in combination with those cards that will prevent you from losing, it can help you clean up what your opponent attempted to do the turn before. And that's why I chose it. And I think that's how it competes against the meta. It's extra mass removal, and that can be pretty key at some points now. And like I said, will become more relevant later when you see decks like Prophecy, who maybe won't put an enormous board. They won't create an enormous field for you to deal with, but they can put a field like Dark World that it's easy to replace over and over again. And it also forces them to use their cards to protect, so there's less situations where you find yourself losing in like the battle step. And how easy is it to come by? Lightning Vortex was printed as a super rare a long time ago, also as an ultimate rare in the same pack, and then ever since then it's just gotten plenty of common reprints, so it's really easy to come by. I can't give you a price, but I wouldn't imagine one copy costing you more than 50 cents, so it's pretty easy to come by. And as far as abusing it, I don't think you really abuse it. I'm pretty sure against different levels of the quality of player you're playing, it may become much more advantageous for you. If you're playing a lesser skill player who's going to commit more to the field without purpose, then of course that Lightning Vortex is going to be almost as good as a Dark Hole. As you get up to a really quality player, it may not be that advantageous. You might not get a lot of advantage out of it, but it can still help you stay in a game.
You mentioned one thing in there that made me really smile, and you said Dark Hole. The best part about Lightning Vortex is, granted, yes, the hand presence of having to discard a card to wipe the field is a bit of an issue, or wipe the monster field. But this card, unlike Dark Hole, can be ran at 3. So if you want to run 3 of these and a Dark Hole just to be that destructive guy, you can.
Sure, and also it's unlike Dark Hole, because if you have anything on a board, Dark Hole would get rid of it as well. Lightning Vortex won't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think all 3 of us kind of picked cards that had a discard cost. So, I mean, any of those 3 as budget options, again, going back to try to minimize that cost. So, definitely, any of those 3, I'd say you want to run something where getting things in the graveyard is going to be advantageous to you. You want to get your best bang for your buck. But these are all good, viable options for different reasons. Destruction negation, destruction, or effect negation. And they're going to be within a budget build as far as a side deck item. Like most of these cards, yeah, you're not going to main them, but depending on what you're playing against, these are good options to have in there to counter some of the meta decks.
Hey, if you're playing Destiny Hero Diamond, dude, you might just be playing Lightning Vortex in the main deck.
And then you get that for free.
Indeed.
Oh. So, with Lightning Vortex down, we'll come back around. To me, my second pick, we each picked a couple cards, is the End of Anubis. No, this hasn't had a million reprints, but why did I pick it? I picked it because this is Necro Valley on steroids. Necro Valley just with them errating the text It just stops you from moving things from the graveyard to other places. I picked the End of Anubis because, number one, he's got 2,500 attack, which is a pretty magic number in Yu-Gi-Oh! For one tribute. And there's nothing stopping him from being special summoned. And as long as he's face up on the field, all effects of spell, trap, and monster cards that designate cards in the graveyard or that activate in the graveyard are negated. Like I said, this is Necro Valley on steroids. This is complete and total graveyard negation. How does it offset the meta? A lot of our loops depend on the graveyard. Mermails, Windups, Chaos Dragons, Dark World. A lot of your high meta decks depend on things hitting the graveyard and being able to pull them out of the graveyard to get your engines to go off. So it's a good side deck option just to have, because more than likely if you don't run into one of the top 3 to 4, you're going to run into at least one meta deck and at least one rogue deck that the End of Anubis could be useful against. Because let's face it, the graveyard and the out of play area have become almost as important to the game as the actual deck itself and your hand. So every area of your field is important. If you can take one part out of it, that's going to help shut down your opponent. How easy is it to come by? There's actually only been 2 prints of it. It came out in Ancient Sanctuary, was the first release of it. And then it was re-released in the Lost Millennium as a limited edition. Good thing, it's not a highly played card. So you can pick it up for $2 to $5. So, how would I abuse it? I abuse it mostly in Grave Keepers. It's great to have Necro Valley out, but your opponent is almost always going to have an out to get rid of Necro Valley. When I run Grave Keepers, I run it so the graveyard's not going to be used. I don't want anything to come out of that graveyard. So I'll pop in a Visionary or 2 just for the boost effect. And then I pop a couple of End of Anubises in there. Because other than my Necro Valleys, I know I can get out a 2,500 attack monster that's going to keep that graveyard from being able to be used. End of Anubis, great card. Level 6, so not a whole lot of Xyz monsters he can go into, but with Plague Spreader and Krebins being more of your more popular tuner monsters, he's great material out there to go into a level 8 Synchro. But any games I've played with the End of Anubis, I've never had to use my extra deck. If that tells you how broken he can be, not will be, because no card is guaranteed to always be broken. But any game I've played with the End of Anubis, I've never had to use my extra deck. I have played my straight out just deck itself, because being able to take the graveyard out of the equation in today's meta is very powerful. So, Eddie, Ginzo, any thoughts on the End of Anubis?
Ginzo?
Just that it's really great against Mermail. I think it's the most, I guess is the deck that it impacts the most. And what I would run it in, like, would probably be generically Monarchs, again, because they could put it on the field for pretty much free, and they want to run stuff like End of Anubis and Vanity Fiends that kind of lock out what your opponent's strengths of their decks are.
Well, that and once they get rid of the End of Anubis, then your Treeborn Frog is free to come back.
Yeah.
if that's the only thoughts on the end of Anubis, I'll pass it on to Eddie with his second pick.
Okay, my second pick goes to Summon Limit. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with how easy is it to come by. The only problem with it is it's only been printed once, and that's been in Light of Destruction. It's a common card though, so it should be fairly cheap because not a lot of people are gonna play it that I know of. Its effect is, for those who don't know, neither player can summon more than 2 times per turn. So, for those big swarm heavy decks, this card is going to stop that. It's a handy side because if you drop Rescue Rabbit, you're only going to be able to use the effective rabbit, and then boom, there's your summons. You can't do anything else that turn. If you're going to use Tour Guide, you summon Tour Guide, you pull a monster from your deck to your field, and then you can't XYZ. So that little XYZ problem thing, gone now. If you're wanting to play against quick draw decks, the deck that normally it just goes, I ditch Dandelion to my graveyard, I special summon quick draw Synchron, and then pops up the 2 Dandelion tokens along with him. You can't do anything else after that. You can't instantly go in for the level 6, level 7 Synchro.
Here's this cheap little plug here, just for a troll deck that I love to just toss in every once in a while. Kaiser Coliseum.
Yeah, that too. That works too. If need be, you can stop Stardust Dragon with it. And there's just so many things you can just break and abuse with this card if you want to use it. And plus, it can be ran at 3. So, you know, up to you guys now if you guys wanted to, I open the floor for discussion.
Any thoughts, Genzo?
That's an interesting card, because I'm just trying to think of, right off the top of my head, a lot of decks that you would see, let's say, on Do the Network, or maybe at your locals, that you will come in contact with this. I mean, it really puts the brakes on a lot of decks, because like Eddie mentioned, Rescue Rabbit is a summon, banish for his effect, especially summon 2 dinosaurs. Well, you can't make that play, so because you can't make your Ixies after the fact. So, I mean, like, it puts the brake on that deck. It puts the brake on any Tour Guide play. So if they have Tour Guide, they have to wait till they get the MST or some form of removal to get it off the field. 6 Samurais, they normally want to summon Kageki and then special summon Kagamusha, or special summon Elder, and then Asceticism. So, like, it just shuts that down. There's 2 summons right there. So there's, while your opponent won't do that, because they know they won't be able to make the finishing touch on that play, which would be Shein or Evolts or Dolka or Zenmings, depending on what deck. It forces them. It's a tempo controller, So it'd be kind of interesting to see someone run this card as like a tech card in their side deck, like as a weaker, probably less effective Royal Oppression. It'd be interesting, to say the least. But the one deck that would shine under it would be, again, probably Prophecy would do well with the card on the field. So, you wouldn't bring it in on them, and you wouldn't bring it in on Dark World, because they would just summon the Dark World, return it to hand, have Grapha, which is kind of what they want to do generally anyway. So, but it's very interesting. It's a fun card to look at and to think about.
For me, just I'm honestly going to say I see it going good as well against wind-ups, because one of the most annoying things wind-ups do in the game is special summon multiple times with Factory and Rabbit and Rat and Magician. Even with Magician at 1, with all the other
And Shark.
and Shark, you have so many options to keep special summoning and special summoning. Let overlay for Xyz monsters, drop Xyz units to bring other monsters, and just go nuts. Even with them getting rid of Zen Mighty, Leviair, take your opponent's rabbit or your own rabbit, re-abuse it. There's so many ways to abuse windups that Summon Limit is a good way of putting the brakes on that deck. But
Well, I will say this: while it would be good against windups, I actually got to watch some really competitive tournament games with windups, and I was shocked. Like Zen Mighty gone and Magician of One is a summon limit in itself. Like the deck really has, where it used to have these standard plays that would create, advantage. They don't do much anymore. So like if you can effect the first play, you're good. It's really surprising.
so, with Summon Limit gone over, we'll get on to Ginzo's second pick.
Ginzo doesn't have a second pick. He kind of included 2 cards in his one because they kind of did the same thing, which were Needle Sealing and Lightning Vortex.
Ah, yes, needle
But
sealing.
using Lightning Vortex as the kind of precedent.
Well, then I guess kind of finished up going over things we were going to look at. Again, these are mostly opinion based, but some good knowledge. Some newer players may not be aware of some of these cards. Some older players may just have not dusted off their binders, their old binders, and looked back at some of these cards. But in today's meta, some of these cards can actually make an impact on the game. So they're definitely cards not to be forgotten. Just want to tell everyone, still have the race to 8,000 going on. So bring your friends. Make sure they validate in the user validation box, or else you're not going to get onto the board. If we don't see you say "I am human" in that box, which now people who are not logged in can see it, you're not getting onto the board. So make sure that you just post in there and say, "Hey, I'm human. Please validate me." An administrator will get you in there. And just for referring friends, you got the chance to win an Exodia mat. We still have our mod spots open. We're having our elite nominations until the end of March. Going down to the Yu-Gi-Oh area, we've been having articles go up fairly commonly every week, at least for myself. And of course, our card of the week, worst card of the week, and forbidden reviews. Make sure Tuesdays we picked up the weekly championship series that Ginzo's running. Got a chance to win a tag and bragging rights that you're the king of the forum for the week as far as Yu-Gi-Oh is concerned. And still have our flash tournaments on Thursday. We're getting close to the top 8 of the Grand Prix between Midnight TCG and Yu-Gi-Oh forums. And make sure you're checking in the gaming section. Felicity Bryan has started to put up some articles in that section, so definitely check out the gaming section. And of course, Ginzaki and Eddie and Notu's their gaming booth. And we still have some Mafia spots open. Get down there and sign up. And King Guy Pie has been putting up some regular articles in movies and sports. So go down there, take a look at that. Like I said, just bring your friends. Make sure you're there on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Chance to win free stuff and recognition on the site. And we try to be as friendly as possible. So usually if you come, you stay. So with that
Also, the Hall of Champions.
Yes. You will be immortalized in the Hall of Champions whenever you're a weekly championship winner. So with that, I'll let Eddie drum us out.
I don't have anything wittful thingy to sing or do any.